Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for our third program in the Wild About the Dulles Wetlands series. My name is Kim Strader, and I'm the volunteer coordinator with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. Loudoun Wildlife is an organization that was formed in 1995 by four local concerned citizens who were determined to protect wildlife habitat from the pressures of rapid development and population growth. We are a volunteer-driven and membership-based nonprofit that focuses on education, citizen science, habitat conservation, conservation advocacy, and we do have an 89-acre JK Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary property. Our mission is to protect, preserve, and restore wildlife habitat, and our vision is a Loudoun County where people and wildlife thrive together. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is the third in a series of 5 programs that we are doing about the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. And this is a wetland that's located in Loudoun County, Virginia. And it was created in 1990, or construction started in 1995. And the wetlands were created to offset damage that was occurring as the Dulles Greenway Road was being built. This is a 30th anniversary of the Dulles Greenway Wetlands, as well as the 30th anniversary of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. We partner with the Dulles Greenway to steward this property. And just so that you know, the Dulles Greenway Wetlands is closed to the public, but Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy does offer occasional bird walks. And we will include a link to our event calendar, as well as a link to the other programs that are in this series so that you can take a look at those things. And if you're local, register for some of our events. And if you're not local, we also do virtual programs. All of our programs are free. So this evening, we will be hearing from Liz Dennison, who is one of Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy's longtime volunteers, and she also serves as the Eagle Specialist on the Dulles Greenway Eagle Camp. She has been working with birds of prey for over 15 years as an educator, rehabilitator, and falconer. In 2016, she founded Secret Gardens Birds and Bees to share her love of birds of prey and to spread the word about the essential role they play in healthy ecosystems. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Liz Dennison. And as I said, if you have any questions, put them into chat and we'll get to them at the end. Thanks so much and enjoy.
Okay, hi everybody. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to get started, and first I want to say thank you to Trip 2 and Dulles Greenway and to Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy for forming this partnership that makes all of this possible and makes it possible for all of us to enjoy watching these eagles. And as you heard, this is all about the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. And as Kim said, construction of the wetlands began in 1966, and it was to mitigate the loss of 64 acres of federally protected wetlands. And Trip 2 mitigated this loss as required by law. And this was a law that was enacted by executive order going back all the way to Jimmy Carter and has been supported by presidents all throughout the years, that if wetlands are destroyed, they must be created somewhere else. And we were very fortunate that they were created right here in Loudoun County, because the law only actually requires that they be in the same larger drainage area, which includes many counties. So we are very happy to have this constructed wetland here. Now, if you go back to 1957 and look at this photo, this is farmland. And this is the land that is going to become the wetland. And we think that before it was farmland, it actually was a wetland that was drained to be used for farming. So this is how it looked in 1957. If you come up to, I think this is about 2002, you can see that there's a beginning of some ponding here. It's really beginning to become a wetland. This is Goose Creek all through here. And it's starting to develop even just a few years after work began. And if we come all the way up to 2022, you can see that it is now pretty much a mature wetland. You can see that the vegetation has grown up. You can see that the water has filled in. There are various little ponds and streams throughout it. And again, this is Goose Creek, and that's very important to our eagles. And so is this housing development here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, one of the best things, in my opinion, about the wetland is that there is an eagle's nest. And in September of 2021, Dulles Greenway partnered with the American Eagle Foundation, HD on Tap, and Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy to install 2 eagle cams. The installations were done in September because that's a good time to do that. Any young eaglets have fledged long before that, and the courtship and nesting season has not yet begun. The work was done at night to minimize any disturbance to the eagles. And there's a wonderful video of this that you can watch. We'll give you the links to that. Equally important is the fact that the Dulles Greenway Wetlands is kind of a remote area, and it doesn't have any access to, Wi-Fi or anything like that. So we had to use solar panels to power the cameras. And also, we were very fortunate to find someone in those houses who was willing to let us use their Wi-Fi. We had direct line of sight to their house. We were able to transmit the data from the nest to the house, where then it can go out to the rest of the world. And as I said, there's a wonderful video about this. The link is in this photo, but we will give you that link. We can put it in the chat too, so that you can have it and watch this video. It's really very interesting. So why would we want to do all this? Why is this important? Well, according to the American Eagle Foundation, live stream camera programs create wonderful opportunities to educate the public and to really get them involved kind of emotionally with the wildlife out there. And then that helps to, to increase activity and, to get people really involved. Loudoun Wildlife has been using the wetlands for education. As Kim mentioned, the guided walks have been absolutely wonderful, wonderful way to learn about wetlands. And I encourage you to, if you're not a member of Loudoun Wildlife, to become one so that you can get to know about these upcoming walks early enough to actually get a place. But even to me, the most important thing is the outreach to schools. One of the things that was done throughout the first couple of years of this nest is we did individual programs with many different schools. And we started this because the schools were so involved from the beginning. More than 9,000 students from Loudoun County Public Schools participated in the naming contest for our 2 eagles. And the names Rosa and Martin were chosen from a list of 11 finalists submitted by Loudoun County Public School students. And it was the students from Sterling Middle School who submitted the winning entry, Rosa and Martin, named in honor of civil rights icons Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And we are very proud of our students for selecting those wonderful names. And in the 23-24 season, we did 65 private classroom chats, which means that we scheduled it with the teachers. We were set up in the classrooms, and the students were just amazed. You could hear them. There were little squeals of delight every time they saw the eggs or watched Rosa feed her nestlings. So this was a wonderful way to reach all of these kids. Now, a little background about eagles. I think most of you are probably familiar that the eagle population really plummeted in the lower 48 states to fewer than 500 breeding pairs in the 1960s. Now, what this meant for Loudoun County is that throughout the Chesapeake Bay in the 1930s, there were 600 to 800 breeding pairs. Around 1939 to 1940, the pesticide DDT came into widespread use. And although some ornithologists and scientists noticed an immediate decline in some bird species, it wasn't until much, much later, after DDT use had peaked around 1959, that Rachel Carson took up the Rachel Carson really made this public. She published in 1962 Silent Spring, and that brought it into the public view, and people really became aware that the populations of birds like eagles, ospreys, peregrine falcons, condors had just plummeted down to almost nothing. And it's an excellent book. I really recommend that you read it. It is still as relevant today as it was in the past. That got scientists really involved to prove that indeed DDT could weaken the shells that of the eggs of these birds, and the shells became so weak that they cracked during incubation, and that is why the populations plummeted. And then they were able to prove it in the wild as well. And once that happened, around 1972, the US banned DDT for most applications. But it took a long time for the populations of these birds to recover. And you can see that in these numbers. The recovery was slow for a while for eagles, and then eventually kind of skyrocketed. And for some birds, like the condors, they're still struggling a bit, and even peregrine falcons aren't quite there yet. So I am missing a slide here. Hang on just a minute. I want to see if I can get back there. I don't know why this is. No, never mind. Sorry about that. Okay, so eagles in Loudoun. This is what happened to eagles in Loudoun. And these are results from the Christmas bird counts for the circle right in the center of Loudoun County, which includes the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. And you can see going back to 1997, there were very few eagles counted. And then that gradually grew over the years. And in the past few years, you can see that it kind of skyrocketed. We had a couple of years where the count was 67 bald eagles. Then in 2023, it was a whopping 92 eagles. And this year it was down a little back to 67. So maybe that 92 was a little bit of an outlier, but you can see there are a lot of eagles. And not all of these are eagles with nests. Some of these are what we call floaters. They are adult breeding age eagles without a nest, without a mate probably. And a certain number of these are important in the environment so that we have replacements for nesting eagles that die. And so we need a kind of balance of this. Too many, and it can cause problems with too many challenges with the nests and conflicts among the eagles. And when I'm talking about that Christmas bird count, that's just a 15-mile circle. You can see it there. That includes the Dulles Greenway Wetlands. So the first photo I have of eagles in the wetlands is from 2007. And this is an old nest. It was in a sycamore. And you can see that they have 3 little nestlings in that nest. And they were doing very well there. And unfortunately, that tree came down, but that did not deter the eagles because by 2012, there was a new nest, and probably quite a bit earlier than that, a new nest in a pignut hickory tree. And this is the nest that we installed the cameras on and that we've been watching for the past few years. Now we can meet our eagles, Rosa and Martin. First of all, you can see Rosa on the right in both photos and Martin on the left. One thing that you can notice is that Rosa is much larger than Martin, and this is pretty typical. Among birds of prey, the females are usually larger than the male and sometimes quite a bit larger, and that's pretty obvious in these photos. So how do we, besides size, identify the eagles and know that we are looking at a particular eagle? Well, we look at very small details. As you can see, Martin on the left here has clear eyes, and Rosa has speckled eyes. So that's one thing using the camera that we can see. You can see Rosa's speckled eyes. We can also see two little dark feathers on the heads of both birds, one on the right side, one on the left side. That's another way we can tell. And Rosa has a dark, dark spot on her tail. And we're going to talk a little bit about the next, what has happened over the few years, and we need a little background to know where things are. So you can see the landfill, which is very important, and you can see how close it is to the wetland there. And you can see the reservoir, which is an important resource for eagles. And then all the way up to the right of that photo, you can see the Potomac River. And these are all areas which our eagles can travel to. And you can see Goose Creek on this map as well. And when we share information from the nest, we have sort of a map of the area surrounding the nest. And every branch and perch and position that the eagles might use is named by our wonderful camera volunteers, so that when we are recording what's happening at the nest, we have a reference point. And the same is true for the more general location, the upper creek, the lower creek, creek perches, the snag tree, which unfortunately came down because that was a really big place where the eagles would perch and would consume their meals. We also see a lot of things around the nest, and we record those as well. Lots of different types of birds and animals. It's a very active place, and the wetland truly is absolutely thriving. And one of the most wonderful things is to look at all the photos of all these different animals that we can see on our cameras, not just the eagles. But there are intruders to the nest too. They include bald eagles. This is an immature eagle that tries to fly too close to the nest and is chased away by Rosa. This is an adult or subadult eagle that also is challenging. And you can see that one was chased away pretty quickly too. And I'm sure most of you are eagle watchers, so you already know this, but one of the ways we decide and can tell whether an eagle is an adult or an immature or maybe a hatch year is by their plumage. It takes about 5 years for an eagle to get its adult plumage, and in between that, we can make a pretty good guess at the age. But it's a little bit difficult in the night vision. It's not quite as clear. We also have red-tailed hawks hanging around. They usually come to the nest looking for leftover food when the eagles aren't there. We have squirrels, lots of squirrels. And the squirrels are living in and on the nest and all around the nest, and they're not particularly afraid of the eagles. And I think it's because they know that they can get way down that tree before the eagle can get them. And flying squirrels. Now be ready, this is a pretty quick video. Flying squirrels in the nest. And raccoons. Martin used to like to bring corn cobs to the nest, and the raccoons would take advantage of that when the eagles weren't there. And raccoons are cute, but they're also very dangerous. Raccoons are not a real threat. You can see that raccoon down there at the bottom of the nest. Raccoons are not a big threat to an adult bald eagle, but they are very dangerous to nestlings, even fledglings, and certainly to the eggs if they're ever left unprotected. And the eagles will defend against the raccoons, but this is dangerous. And so in order to protect the eagles from the raccoons, we did install some protection around the base of the tree. And this was done in consultation with the American Eagle Foundation and various other authorities because it is a little bit controversial. After all, the raccoons are natural, they're native there, and their interaction with the eagles is natural. But there's been a lot of investment in this nest, and the outreach has been absolutely fantastic. So it made sense to put this protection there. There are plenty of other trees for the raccoons. Barred owls are also a little bit of a threat. So barred owl, giving Rosa a warning. Barred owls are not really a match for an eagle during the day. And eagles could prey on barred owl eggs and barred owl chicks. And so that barred owl is giving Rosa a little bit of a warning that at night there could be a little bit of, I don't know, what would you say, revenge maybe? So it's a warning. And then there's this, coyotes. I'm going to let this play for a minute because this is really the call of the wild. And you can see that it disturbs Rosa and Martin a little bit, but the coyotes are not a threat to them in the nest. They are not going to climb 100 feet up into that tree, but still, they are concerned. Now, what do the eagles in the wetlands eat? Well, fish is a very big part of their diet, as it is with all eagles. And there's not a lot of fish in Goose Creek that flows right by the nest, but there are ponds in the wetlands that are stocked with fish. They are full of fish. And the same thing with a lot of the farm ponds around there. Then they can go to the reservoir to get fish, and even all the way up to the Potomac River. But they also eat a variety of small animals. And I'm not quite sure what this poor sad looking thing is there, but they would bring to the nest a wide variety of foods. We saw raccoons, possums, squirrels, ducks, a lot of ducklings, the occasional domestic cat, um, just about anything they could catch, they would bring to the nest. And they didn't necessarily limit themselves to hunting for prey. They were fine with roadkill that they could find around, and also with occasionally going to the landfill or dumpster diving and bringing back something that is, kind of unexpected and sometimes human food that they brought back, various meats and things. So the first year with the camera was all about raising Orion. And I love this photo because this is Orion at about 1 day old. And you can see Rosa's foot there and how big Rosa's foot is compared to her little hatchling there. And just, I was amazed at how gentle she was. So that first egg was laid on February 1st, and a second egg was laid on February 4th. And hatch was expected in 34 to 36 days. And the first egg hatched right about on time. And unfortunately, the second egg never hatched. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. I can't even really speculate on that. But we did have one healthy little hatchling there at 2 days old. By the time he was 18 days old in that second photo, he had already was losing his white fluffy natal down and was growing in his gray downy feathers, which means that he could thermoregulate. The parents did not have to keep him warm all the time. And you can see that bulge on his chest there. That's his crop. That means that he has had a very good meal. He has filled his stomach and filled his crop. It's kind of a pouch in the esophagus where he can store extra food. that he can swallow down further down as soon as he digests what's in his stomach. At 41 days old, he's almost the size of an adult. Now, I'm saying he, I don't really know that for a fact. Orion could have been female as well. There's really no way to tell for sure. And you can see that at that point, Orion was starting to exercise his wings. He's grown quite large, almost adult size, and the feathers are still growing in. And then at 59 days old, he is full-sized. So an eagle grows from that tiny little hatchling to full grown in less than 2 months. That's a lot of food the parents have to provide. Excuse me. At 72 days, Orion was branching. He was going out onto the branches of the tree, and this is a normal part of a raptor's development. They leave the nest, they explore the tree, they exercise their wings, and it's kind of a scary time because this is the time when some of them fall. They're a little bit awkward, it's a little bit risky, but fortunately, Orion held on, and at 81 days old, which is just about normal, he fledged. There's no fuss, no fanfare, just spread his wings and flew. But even at this age, he had flown. This is about 11 days after fledge. He was still very awkward, and he's trying to get to the nest, and he doesn't quite make it. So he's going to cling to the edge there. The adult knows he's there, and that's him calling. So watch what happens. So he finally made it up to the nest, but it wasn't the most graceful entrance. This is one photo from October. I think this is probably the last time we were pretty sure we had a photo of Orion and not another juvenile potentially, all grown up. So the parents took a little time off, and then in year 2, 2023, we had a good start, and I call this year a full house. So we had the normal courtship activities, the nest rebuilding, the mating at the nest, and finally, eggs. And this time we had 3 eggs, one laid on February 4th, one on the 7th, and one on the 11th. And they were named at this point DG3, DG4, and DG5, because this is a sequence number for Dulles Greenway. So this was the 3rd egg, the 4th, and the 5th at this nest. We got up to the the hatch time, and everybody was pretty anxious for these eggs to hatch. Even the adult eagles, Rosa and Martin, were looking. And when you get close to hatching, it's possible that they can hear sounds from within the egg, that they may see some movement of the egg, and that's probably what they're watching here. And amazingly, we were so happy that all 3 eggs hatched pretty much right on time. The first hatched on March 14th and was named Pi because that is Pi Day. The second hatched on March 17th and was named Pat because that was St. Patrick's Day. And the third hatched on March 19th and was named Flora because we liked the name. And that doesn't imply that Flora is female. We really don't know, but it's a good name. And we followed them through the same development as we did with Orion, only this time in triplicate. And it was so much fun to watch them do everything together as they grew. But as you can see, the nests that looked really big when there were just the two adult eagles and one small nestling doesn't look so big with the full family on there now. And I do want to point out the trash that's in that nest. You can see all that plastic and things. That is trash that was brought back by the eagles. Some of it was wrapped around food and they tore into it and ate it. And some of it was just brought back because it was interesting to them. Birds have a tendency to do that. And we really don't like to see that in the nest, but there's nothing we can do about it. We certainly can't go up there and get it and disturb the nest. So we just have to hope that they don't become entangled in it or harmed by it in any way. So this is a very crowded nest. And while I play this video, I want you to watch the lower right side of the nest and see what happens here. This is feeding time for all three. Pretty aggressive about the food. You can see the one in the back has a pretty full crop. That one's already had a meal. Now watch what happens to the nest. And both eagles, those two eagles were aware that a chunk of the nest has fallen. Well, a day later, this is what happens. One of the eaglets, DG4, Pat, fell from the nest. You could see that he was trying very hard to hold on, but eventually fell all the way to the ground. And it was unfortunate that he was the one to fall because he was, even though he was the second one laid and second one hatched, he was less prepared than the others. He had not been doing his exercises as much. He was less aggressive. And so we were very concerned. It was a very chilly night. Temperatures were only about 50. It was raining. And so first thing in the morning, we got a wonderful eagle rescuer to go out there, Billy Rios, and was able to find him in the tall grass right under the tree and pick him up. And as you can see, he's very large, but that really is just a fledgling and not quite a fledgling even. And Billy ended up taking him to Dr. Belinda Burwell at Wildlife Vet Care, and she found that he was a little bit underweight, he was slightly anemic, he was definitely chilled and a little hypothermic, and had some bruises from the fall, and definitely was not flying. Now, very often at this time of year, when you find a bird like this on the ground, it is a fledgling, and usually the best thing to do is just put it back. But this bird was clearly not ready. And so Pat was transferred down to Wildlife Center of Virginia, which is a wonderful facility and very well equipped to deal with young eagles. And you can see on the left there, their large flight cage with other eagles in it. And, eagles can really fly the length of this cage. I think it might be about 90 feet. It's a long distance and they can fly back and forth. And the area up at the top, you can see a little structure up there on the left side. There's actually an eagle nest in there. They have constructed an eagle's nest, and they can open the doors up there so that when a fledgling like Pat is ready to join the other eagles and fly on his own, he can do that. So he can kind of have a normal fledge even in that enclosure. And within that enclosure, they can learn to hunt live prey, they can learn from the other eagles, and they can exercise and develop their flight muscles to be ready for release at some point in the future. And you can see those little green tabs on him in the photo on the right, and those are to protect his wrists. Birds in situations like this often damage their wrists, and we want to keep them safe. Well, a couple of days after after Pat fell, this happened. This was about 5 days later, I think, 4 or 5 days. So Pi fell. And I have to say, Flora did some quick moves to stay on the branch there and is now clinging to the little bit of the nest that's left. But this was a bit of a different situation because Pi was a little bit older than Pat to begin with. And this was a few days later, and Pi really was ready to fledge. So Pi was also taken to wildlife veterinary care for a checkup. They watched him fly. He flew well. So he was brought right back to the wetlands that same day and did very well and was back in the tree within a day or two. Flora was the only one to stay on that little bit of nest until an actual normal fledge day. And I have to say, this is just about the most beautiful fledge of an eagle I have ever seen. And I'm so glad our cam operators are good and we're able to follow her. And I'm just going to hold a minute because they are going to zoom in, and you will see that they tracked her down into the trees. And that was just beautiful. And so all three of our eagles now, our eaglets, are out of the nest. And it took a little while, but eventually Pat comes home. And on August 31st, so So that was Pat's release on August 31st, finally coming back to the wetlands. And I can tell you he was headed right toward the river there. But going back a few months, back to June, the decision was made to rebuild the nest. And these are people from Windows to Wildlife. They are the same people that put the cameras up on the nest. They came and rebuilt a nest. And the decision was made to do that early rather than waiting until after the whole nesting season because there was no nest there anymore. The eagles were not coming back to that tree. They were not using it at all. And it made sense to get it done as early as possible so that there would be nothing to keep the eagles away when they started to come back for their courtship and nesting season. And there is also a wonderful video available to watch the rebuilding of the nest, and we will definitely share that with you as well. So then we came to year 3. And this is 2024, and we got off to a really good start. Martin came back to the rebuilt nest on September 18th. Rosa came back a little bit later. And it was so interesting to watch them. They were very curious and they really checked out the nest. They walked around the nest, they kind of jumped on it, they pulled its sticks to check its strength. They really, really investigated this nest to make sure it was sturdy and strong. And I think they were a little bit puzzled because I think they remembered that there had been no nest there. So couldn't really understand where this had come from. But that was okay. They started their work and they started to rebuild it and add on to it to make it look more like an eagle's nest. Unfortunately, right around December 2nd, Martin flew off one day in the morning and was never seen again. We have no idea what happened to him. There were no indications that he was sick or injured in any way. We did call around to every rehabber in a pretty wide area, to put them on alert if they were to get any eagle patients in. We talked to Department of Wildlife Resources if they had any news of any eagles that were found dead or injured, and nothing. There certainly were eagles that were brought to rehabbers, but none of them fit Martin's description. So we just have no idea. I am pretty sure that something catastrophic happened to him. I don't think he just decided to leave. Things were going along so well and they were getting so close to the actual nesting season. But because there were a lot of eagles in the area, it didn't take long, really just a couple of weeks for Rosa to have her first suitor, who we named V1, Visitor 1. And that didn't last long because on the same day, December 11th, Visitor 1 was chased away by Visitor 2, V2. And, there are a lot of eagles. They are floaters. They're looking for a mate and for a nest. And this was a very attractive situation for them. Rosa wanted to show V2 that she was the boss. And this is how she did it. See that little shove there? And not just once, but twice. And you can see how submissive he is to the much larger female there. But after a while, I think Rosa decided that V2 wasn't so bad, and they began all their courtship and their mating. And if you remember what I said about identifying Rosa by the dark marks on her tail, there she is. And by 12:31, they were working on the nest together, and everything was going along very well until one day. Now, why am I showing you a slice of ham? Well, one day Rosa went to the landfill or to a dumpster and grabbed a ham steak, kind of like this one, went back to the nest, ate the ham, and left that little circular bone that's in the middle there in the nest. You can see it right there. Now, what that happened from that is I'm sorry, where are we here? V2, this guy here, started to incubate that bone, thinking it was an egg. And he did a very good job of it. You can see him in those videos. He's rolling it, he's keeping it warm, he's really nestling down on it, even incubating it overnight. Probably puzzled why Rosa wasn't doing that, because the female eagle usually takes the night shift for incubation. And Rosa is looking on, kind of thinking, what is he doing? That's not an egg. And this went on for quite a number of days. Finally, Rosa kind of moved the bone, kind of got it buried under some of the nesting material, and V2 stopped incubating it. At this point, we saw a lot more bonding between them and nest building, setting up the nest bowl, mating. And so we decided that this was going to be the mate for Rosa this year. And so V2 got a name, and he was named John Lewis, honoring the late Congressman John Lewis. And everything was looking really, really good. And sure enough, finally, an egg was laid. That's our first peek at it. And soon a second egg was laid on February 17th. And everything was looking good for a very brief time. After the eggs were laid, Rosa left the nest. Martin came and should have taken over incubation, and he did not. And this continued. Martin did not incubate these eggs. He did not feed Rosa when she was incubating the eggs. And this is not something that one eagle can do by itself. It really takes two eagles to do all of the incubation duties to make sure everybody gets fed. And so the eggs were left unattended too often for too long at very cold temperatures. And it wasn't long before we realized that they were not going to be viable. They were not going to hatch. And at some point, Rosa realized this too. And this was February 23rd. And this was absolutely the saddest thing I have ever seen. Rosa got up from the eggs at about 1:07 in the morning. And she stood there for a long time, just looking at the two eggs. This went on for a while. A little bit later, Lewis came and stood with her. And the two of them stood there just looking at those eggs. 3:00 in the morning, they were still doing this. They were still doing this until almost sunrise. And it really looked like they were mourning the loss of these eggs and kind of saying goodbye to the nesting season for this year. They were making a decision. And just before sunrise, both of them flew off and abandoned the eggs. Rosa was last seen on February 24th. Again, there's no indication that she was ill. There's no indication that she was injured. We don't know what happened. We don't necessarily assume that anything happened to her, just that she abandoned the nest. And pretty soon, we had a new couple checking it out. We had never seen these two eagles before. And then we had an eagle come by frequently that we called Lady. And Lewis came by and kind of interacted and courted Lady. And we kind of hoped there might be eggs. It wasn't really too late yet, but that wasn't to be. And Lewis was last seen on March 9th. So we do not know what happened to Lewis either. And, it could be so many different kinds of things. Anything could happen. They could be hit by cars. They could have some kind of acute poisoning. They could lose in a battle with another eagle. There's just no way to know what has happened to them. But Lady has stayed around. And other males have come. There was NM, new male, and they were together for a while. And then there was Lady and Beau. Beau is a younger eagle. You can see he still has some dark feathers on his tail there. Lady and new visitor. They seem to be getting along really well. Hambone is still in the nest. And now we are up to year 4. And what is going to happen? Well, in 2025, we had a big surprise. There is an alternate nest in the wetlands. This is not unusual for eagles. It's very common for eagles to have an alternate nest. The thinking is that it's, as protection against the possibility that the primary nest will fail or collapse or something happen close to the nesting season. Unfortunately, this is not in an accessible area. This is really kind of the, the best photo that we have of these eagles. So it's very hard to identify who they are. But this does mean that even if Lady and the male she's with do have eggs, it could be in this nest and not in the nest with the cameras on. Second nest. But we have been seeing Lady and what we're now calling A2M. This is a more standard name for an eagle. It's adult second male that has been at this nest. And we're seeing appropriate behavior. There we have Lady calling out to A2M. He's come back with food for her. This is typical courtship behavior. They are mating, they are defending the nest, they are checking out the nest bowl. Everything is looking good. But we really don't know. And the past couple of days, the cameras have been down due to lack of sunshine for the solar panels, and they're probably covered with snow now too. And this is what the nests look like today. So we just went in for a quick snapshot of them, and doesn't look like much has been going on, but we really don't know what the future holds. We're hopeful, but who knows? And things are changing. And one thing that's really important now is the number of eagles, then these number of floaters around. Early on in the recovery of the eagle population, it was very common to see nests with 3 young and 3 successfully fledged young. This is becoming less common now because the area is getting very crowded. There are a lot more challenges to the nest, a lot more competition for the nest and for mates. And that means that the eagles are spending more time defending the nest. They are spending more time defending their mate, less time caring for the young. And we are probably going to see more nest failures and fewer nests with a large number of eaglets. This is not a problem. This is kind of the natural end to the recovery of a population. We're going to have to see the population balance out to what the area can support. And right now, everything looks really good. There are a lot of eagles in the area. There are a lot of eagle nests in the area. And the future looks very bright. We just hope that they come back and use the nest with the cameras on it. And if they don't, maybe someone else will use it, a red-tailed hawk, a great horned owl. Um, Whatever happens, we will be watching. And even if we don't see anyone using this nest this year, we'll still be watching all of the wildlife in the wetlands and listening to the wildlife in the wetlands. I've had people tell me that they actually leave it on in the background just to hear all the nature sounds. And pretty soon we'll be hearing the spring peepers in spite of all the snow today. So that's about what I have for you today. If you have any questions, we do have some of the links. I'm not going to focus on this too much because we will be sharing all of those with everyone who has been on this talk today. So thank you very much for listening. And at this point, I think I will stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions from anybody.
Thank you so much, Liz. And we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, how common is it for nests to collapse and fall apart?
I don't really have an answer for that, but I do know that that nest was there for a long time. They constantly add to it, but it's common for sticks that are deep down inside to become rotted and weak. And also we see the squirrels crawling around in there, the raccoons crawling around in there. So I think it does happen, and the eagles will usually move on to another tree, build a new nest. And, that's really the reason that it was decided to actually build the new nest for them. So they didn't just move to a tree a little further down the down Goose Creek.
Okay. And then also too, within that question is, do parents repair the nest?
Yes, the eagle parents do repair the nest. Every year, that's a big part of their courtship activities. They will come back and they will be bringing new nests. And in fact, the nest tends to grow year after year after year. And so it can become quite heavy. And that can actually bring a tree down or bring the limbs down. But they do a lot of work on that nest.
Thank you, Liz. And our next question is, after initial fledge, how far from the nest can the eagle fly?
After the initial fledge, they're still not really very good at flying. And they won't go very, very far, and they'll often end up on the ground. And then it might take them 3, 4, 5 days to get back up to the nest as they're developing their flight muscles and their flight skills. And the parents will still know where they are. They will still feed them and still protect them, even if they're on the ground or on lower branches. And then they will begin to expand their horizons. And eagles can go pretty far. I think eagles around here probably go as far as the landfill. The landfill is an eagle congregation point. It's a place where they can work on their hunting skills. The landfill is full of rats and mice and things like that. It's also full of food that they can scavenge. There are other eagles there that they can watch and they can learn from. And so I suspect that's where they go. And then later on, they will go further. And, eagles can stay in the area or they can go hundreds of miles.
Okay. Next question. When will Monday evening chat return?
Oh, well, I might hand that one over to you.
I was wondering if you would.
Oh,
So, with everything that has or has not been going on at the nest this year, we have not started our Monday evening chat sessions, and we don't know when we will. And for those of you that don't know, in previous seasons, we would have a chat session every Monday evening on a system called Discord. And basically, it's where people can sign in and ask questions, and we have our Eagle Cam volunteers there and available to answer them live. Like I said, we've had just so little going on at the nest this year. We just haven't, um, I mean, we've talked about it, but we haven't scheduled any. So we'll see. I'll mention this at our next monthly meeting and maybe we'll schedule one for you. No
it would be
promises.
fun to do one. It would be fun to do one just to keep everybody up to date on what's going on.
Yes. Um, do fledges start catching their own food right away, or are the parents still feeding them, and for how long?
The parents do feed them for quite some time, for many weeks after they fledge. And we did see that in the past years. It won't always be at the nest. It sometimes might be on a perch away from the nest. And sometimes the parents will do food drops at the nest and just leave some food there that the fledglings and young eagles can come and get. And that's why sometimes we see a hawk a young eagle that isn't even from the nest might say, "Hey, I'm going to take a chance at this and grab some food." So they do for quite they supplement feed for quite some time. And I'm always hesitant to give actual numbers on these things because they vary by the situation, by the location, by the amount of food available, and by the amount of food available to be scavenged. So,
And someone commented that we had an eagle over on Gleedsville Road munching on a deer. That was about a
mm,
month ago.
yep. They are not, they are not averse to using anything that they can find. Scavenging is easy. Hunting is hard and hunting isn't always successful. And, if there's a deer there and it's relatively fresh, that's a lot of food. And that's a smart eagle.
Yes. And does anyone have any other questions? We've got comments of thank you. I love eagles. So interesting and informative. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Well, good. We're glad everyone has enjoyed this. Um, so as I said at the beginning, we will send out a follow-up email to everyone that was registered for this program. And the email will include a link to this presentation in case there's anything that you want to go back and watch. And I will be sure and include links to the videos that we couldn't hear. Like the coyotes calling, I will get that link from Liz and share that in the
Oh,
email as well.
I'm sorry you couldn't hear that. That's absolutely amazing, the coyotes. I just saw a question go by about whether some eagles are smarter than others. And one thing I can say is that every one of these birds, they have their own personalities. They are very distinct from each other. They are definitely individuals. And some are smarter than others. Some have more skills in certain ways than others. Some are aggressive. Some aren't. really interesting to see how individual they are.
Thank you, Liz. And back to the email real quick. In addition, we will also send a link to where the camera was installed so that you can watch that video, as well as the video of the nest rebuild, which was absolutely fascinating, I might add.
Mhm.
And we'll hope that you're able to join us for the remaining programs within this series of programs. Our next one will be on birds of the wetlands, and then we have one on beavers. And then our program from a couple weeks ago, the Unseen World of the Wetlands, was postponed, and we have not yet reset a date for that, but I promise that we will, and we'll let everyone know what that date is as soon as it's set. Let's see, what else will it, anything else you can think of that you need that we should include? I'll include links to registering for the remaining programs and everything too in that email. Any other questions before we head out tonight? Thank you for the reminder. Great series. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We really enjoyed having you with us this evening.
And thank you to, I love talking about the eagle. So thank you all for listening to me.
And have a great evening.